Who are these people? A guy by the name of Mortimer Smith, another one named Arthur Bester, Jerrold Zacharias. This is not one individual, it's a group of individuals. The Council for Basic Education. And this next one is not an individual either, but it is a symbol, Sputnik 1. Not really a critic, but something you could point to up in the sky and say, hey, look, the Russians got there before we did. You know why? Because they got better schools over there than we do here. Mortimer Smith wrote a book called And Madly Teach. Now, if you are an English teacher or an intellectual of sorts, you have at one time in your life read the Canterbury Tales. One of the Canterbury Tales, I believe, is the Pardoner's Tale. And in it, he talks about the young student. And at the end of that tale, talking about the student, he said, and gladly would he learn and gladly teach. In calling his book And Madly Teach, Mortimer Smith was number one saying, hey, I've read the Canterbury Tales, I'm an intellectual. And number two, saying, we're going crazy in the schools today. These people are mad. In it, he took soft education to task. He pushed for what he called basic education. We are substituting square dancing for square root. We need to get back to academics again. Curtailment of frills, and back to the old meaning of frills now. Smith said, as our schools spend less and less time on serious education and more on matters that can best be learned outside of school, there is an inevitable drop in standards all along the line. Smith's book came out in '49. Arthur Bester echoed him. Bester was a University of Chicago professor. In 1953, he wrote Educational Wastelands. And again, if you are an English teacher or if you are an intellectual, you know that he too was saying, I'm widely read, because he was paraphrasing or using a word from, if you will, T.S. Eliot's famous poem, The Wasteland. Bester expanded upon Smith's work, and then he directly attacked the Illinois version of life adjustment education. Couple quotes from Bester. An educational program becomes regressive, however, when it loses its sense of comparative values and refuses to subordinate incidental activities to essential ones. In its extreme form, regressive education threatens the destruction of liberal and of vocational education alike. Among the most extreme programs is a currently popular one labeled life adjustment education. He also said, liberal education and vocational education may exist side by side in a sound school system, provided the role of each is understood and respected. The school should pay attention to certain non-educational needs of youth, provided the effort does not interfere with its fundamental task of intellectual training. So you can see where Bester stood as well. Along comes Jerrold Zacharias. Zacharias is a professor, a science professor at MIT. He calls a meeting in 1956 of scientists and educators at MIT. The focus of the conference was on the type of science course then being offered in the nation's schools. He called it little more than technology. Now, I took high school chemistry in 1954-55, and the first half of the year we studied theory. The second half of the year we did do technology. We studied the chemical reactions that were critical to all of the industry that was going around Niagara Falls, my hometown, and Western New York. So yes, it was a combination of theory and technology. Zacharias said, you need to be doing all theory. This meeting leads to the formation of something called the Physical Science Study Committee, or PSSC. The committee is charged with producing a new physics textbook. Physics was the class they were going to attack. We're going to develop a new textbook, and emphasis is going to be on concepts, not facts. Now, if you're at all familiar with this particular hierarchy, facts are the basics. Concepts are a generalization from the facts. Principles are a generalization from the concepts. So, whereas the schools were teaching and testing facts, Zacharias and his people wanted the emphasis to be a step up on concepts. Jerrold Zacharias, the grand finale, the final product was the high school course PSSC Physics, which utilized the physics textbook that had been developed. It was the first in the wave of what I'm calling alphabet science courses. PSSC, CHEMS, BSCS, all of those acronym type courses which appeared in the wake of Sputnik. This one, PSSC Physics, was the only one to appear before Sputnik 1 went up. Louis Pasteur is credited with saying, "Chance favors the prepared mind." When Sputnik 1 went up, and the United States was thrashing around trying to find a scapegoat, Zacharias and his troops were ready with an answer to the question, how can we catch up to Russia, the USSR? And the answer, of course, is teach science this new way. The Council for Basic Education was formed in 1956 by Arthur Bester, Mortimer Smith, and 8 other people. Its stress was upon command of fundamental processes. Remember that from the Cardinal Principles report. That was number 2. They wanted us to concentrate on the basics. The Council for Basic Education is still around, and you will see that certain textbooks have been approved by the Council of Basic Education. I guess if they don't contain that phrase, then the council either didn't look at them or didn't approve them. Sputnik was a symbol, and it provided a rallying point for all the critics. Life adjustment education was determined to be the villain, read scapegoat, We were teaching kids all this soft stuff when those Russian kids were learning physics and mathematics. And that's why you can see that little thing up there in the sky rotating every so many hours. That's because we failed. American education failed. Zacharias and PSSC physics were ready,